Hi everybody, today we're going to do another community poll recap. This is number 11. I've been doing one of these every month. This is going to go over all the poll results I've got on my community tab. I put a poll out every 3 days covering a variety of political or cultural related topics. I appreciate all the votes and the comments, so let's see what you guys think, and I'll try to go quickly as I comment on each of these questions. So the oldest poll that we haven't covered already, that is at least 1 month old, we've got what is your opinion of Pete Buttigieg? 8% very favorable, 17 favorable, 20 neutral, 20 unfavorable, 34 very unfavorable. So we've got Mayor Pete. I think he's an interesting guy. Before I really knew anything about him, I thought maybe this is a guy from a smaller town in the Midwest that's going to focus more on populist economics, but at the same time reject identity politics and more of the social justice fringe of the left. But as he got more out there and made a name for himself, all I kept hearing from progressives is this guy is a complete corporate sellout, and he's all about catering to the donor class. Now, I haven't completely studied everything this guy has done, but I'm sure that's at least partially true. The general sentiment seems to be he flopped pretty hard on the Ohio train derailment. There were some other past issues when it comes to regulating airline flights. I'm sure there's a few good things in there, maybe trying to cut out bogus baggage fees on flights. But for me, Buttigieg went completely off the rails when he started talking about racist roads, trees, and how the skin color of people that come over to work on your house is supposed to reflect the broader community, or something like that. That stuff I think is very off-putting for me. Plus the media obsession with him I've always been bemused by, but I know he does have his fan base. To me, it mostly seems like it's establishment Democrats that like him. So it all depends what you want to focus on. If you're into the identity stuff, and probably a couple of clear positives as his time as transportation secretary, then you might be favorable toward him. But these results show he's fairly unpopular. Next question, what is your opinion of ranked choice voting? We've got 39% strongly support, 18 support, 15 neutral, 10 oppose, 18 strongly oppose. So this has a clear majority of support. It's over 50%. It's not totally overwhelming. There are some people that are not a fan of it. And for me, I do support ranked choice voting as long as the primaries are still separated by party. I don't really care for a top 2 or a top 4 system. I don't really want to see 2 or 3 Democrats or Republicans in a general election. To me, the whole point of a primary is to get the top candidate from each party. Then in the general election, you might have a Democrat or Republican, maybe a Green Party and a Libertarian. If you have an independent, they could also have their own primary. But then in the general, doing a ranked choice with one person from each party, that I'm not opposed to. Now, some people think it's one person, one vote. You shouldn't be able to have your vote transferred. And part of that I do think is true. If you voted for somebody and they got eliminated, but then you did not vote for any of the subsequent candidates as your second choice, then in the final round, your vote doesn't have any impact. So I think there's a little bit of truth to that, but overall, I think ranked choice is going to be better than what we have now if it is still separated by party. I'm already a big fan of having runoffs as it is. I always hated when someone goes on to the general election with only 35% of the vote. Theoretically, this would make that a little bit easier, but there's some different views on that, but it's always great to take a look at the comments and get some different perspective. Next question, how much longer will the writers and actors strike last? This was tough to figure out the choices on, but 4% say days, 15% weeks, 51% months, 13% a year or more, 17% not sure, no opinion. Turns out after I put this question up, the writer's strike actually ended, I think, within a week. The actor's strike went on longer, but almost nobody thought the writer's strike was just going to end in a few days. Sometimes that happens, and I really had no idea. I assumed the studios did want to get that thing settled. It had already gone on for a while at that point, and usually with strikes, they tend to be something that kind of ends suddenly, and with the writers, that ended up being the case. Next question, 2024 shift for president in Hawaii compared to its 29.4% Democrat margin in 2020. We've got 17% say 3 or more percent shift toward the Democrats, 12% say 1 to 2.9 toward the Dems, 20% less than 1% shift toward either side, 34% think it's going to go toward the Republicans by 1 to 2.9, and another 17% say 3 or more percent toward the Republicans. Hawaii is already one of the bluest states out there, and they did have some wildfires earlier in the year. There was some controversy about that. I had a question about it a couple of months ago. A lot of people did seem to think the political response was a failure, and that might cause the state to shift toward the GOP next year. I think it could shift toward the Republicans. That's certainly a possibility, given that it's already voting for the Democrats overwhelmingly. But even if it shifted 3 or 4 points, that's going to barely put a dent in that kind of a margin. Now, as for me, what do I think is going to happen? These are always always hard to guess. It could change, but I could see it slightly shifting toward the Republicans. It's always possible those wildfires are just not much of a factor by the time the next election rolls around. Next question, chance Bob Menendez resigns. 5% very likely, 10% likely, 22% are 50-50, 46% unlikely, 16% very unlikely. I had to ask this question because of the indictments involving Menendez. He seemed pretty defiant back then. Unless I missed something, it doesn't look like he's going to resign. I would probably agree with these results and say it's unlikely, but sometimes you never know what's happening behind the scenes. He could just end up coming out there and resigning at some point. Next question. How many of the declared major Republican primary candidates will drop out before the next debate? 10% say 0, 19% say 1. The clear winner, 54% say 2, 8% say 3, and 8% say 4 or more. Well, Tim Scott did just drop out the other day, but that was after the next debate. Between the second and third debate, I believe we had Will Hurd drop out, Larry Elder, and Mike Pence. But Perry Johnson also dropped out. I guess it was debatable if he's a major candidate or not. And Francis Suarez dropped out before that. So the answer is at least 3. If Perry Johnson is in there, then that is going to be 4. I'm not sure how I would have voted on this. With that many candidates, I would have at least said 2, probably 3. But looks like everybody thought 2 was going to be the winner. Next question, what is your opinion of Russell Brand? 10% very favorable, 15 favorable, 43 neutral, 15 unfavorable, and 18 very unfavorable. Brand is an interesting guy, somebody I only follow very passively. He used to be an actor. He's got much more into the social and political commentary over the years. He was in the news because of a scandal in his personal life, and I think his channel got demonetized on YouTube. I think that would cause his favorables to go down, but he's not American. I can understand a lot of people not really knowing who he is. Never really cared for his movies, and from what I've seen of him, he does really go against the establishment. That I think has an appeal. Now, once you go against the establishment that much, I do think you're bound to get a lot of attacks and a lot of smears. That just comes along with the territory. So aside from that, I see some similarities between him and Joe Rogan, whereas he does go against some, of course not all, but some of the issues associated with the left. Usually those are going to be more cultural, and because of that, I've seen him branded as a conservative. That I always disagreed with. I think a lot of people probably have at least 2 or 3 views that are all over the political map, and if somebody ends up having one view that might fall on the right side of the political spectrum, that's hardly enough to say they're any kind of a conservative overall. Next question, how surprised are you about Kevin McCarthy being voted out as speaker? 11% very surprised, 37 moderately, 16 slightly, 36 not surprised. I was kind of surprised by this, somewhere between slightly and moderately. A lot of times I think these disputes get worked out behind the scenes, so for the motion to vacate to actually go through, it's just not something we're used to seeing, so there was some level of surprise. We all saw what happened after the fact. There's a lot of different ways to interpret it. It seems to be either total chaos with the Republicans or democracy is working itself out with the Republicans. Either way, there's kind of a split here. Half are moderately or very surprised, half are not or slightly surprised. Next question, 2024 shift for president in New Hampshire compared to its 7.4% Democrat margin in 2020. 16%, 3 or more toward the Democrats. 24, 1 to 2.9. 18 think it's going to be about even. 31% think it's going to go toward the Republicans by 1 to 2.9. And 11% think it's going to go toward the Republicans by 3 or more. This is a tough one. New Hampshire almost voted for Trump in 2016. Then it shifted hard toward Biden in 2020. If it is Trump and Biden, and it's any kind of a red-leaning national environment, then I could see it at least going 1 point toward the Republicans. Maybe it goes 3 or 4. But if all the baggage with Trump really dominates the campaign, then I could see this going even further toward the Democrats. So tough call. I could see it either way, and these results are kind of evenly scattered toward each side. Let's keep it moving. We've got what should happen with the level of U.S. spending on Israel. 25% say increase spending, 33 maintain current spending, 31 decrease, 10% not sure, no opinion. So I asked this right after the current conflict heated up, and it seems like most politicians and the establishment position is definitely maintain or increase spending, and probably a lot of people that don't follow politics, blue-collar type workers, they're always wondering, why do we break out the checkbook immediately when it comes to another country when there are so many problems right here at home that get little to no attention? That sentiment is completely relatable. I know foreign policy is complicated. There are various alliances and loyalties, but Israel is supposed to be a very powerful country, and maybe when something drastic happens, some sort of humanitarian aid can be understandable, but there's a lot of other countries out there in the world and a lot of problems here at home. That's why I think these results are kind of mixed. Plus, on the progressive side, they seem to not want to spend on Israel because they're sympathetic to the Palestine side. There's there's a lot of different factors here. That's why I asked the question, and these are the results we've got. The last question is, what is your opinion of rent control? 39% strongly support, 15 support, 18 neutral, 13 opposed, 15 strongly opposed. This is a question related to housing, and a clear majority on here, over 50%, 54 at least support, 28% are opposed. So there is support for this, but there is some opposition. I think there are some situations in some areas where capping the rent would make sense. At the same time, I do think less people are going to want to build there in the first place. So for me, I'm going to take more of a neutral approach. It's a complex issue that I'm not going to pretend to know everything about. I am open to it in some places if all the details are worked out on both sides. Nobody wants to see their rent jump up dramatically, but at the same time, no landlord wants to be capped at what they make. The market is going to be affected, and maybe it does work better in some places than others. That's a possibility. But overall, if the solution is more affordable housing, it's a key issue, and there are a variety of different attempts at solutions. I don't know if there's a one-size-fits-all approach. That's why some of these questions are hard for me to answer, because it depends on the situation. But great results. Looks like more people are in favor of it. And that wraps up another community poll recap. I do try to read almost every comment. Sometimes YouTube hides some of them for whatever reason, and there are a lot of different perspectives represented in the comments. Sometimes people are reluctant to speak up, even if the voting shows the opposite. We're hitting over 700 or 800 votes on some of these now, and I'm going to leave it there for now. So let me know in the comments. Do you like the variety of topics? I do try to keep it as neutral as I can. You're never going to please everybody, but let me know your thoughts down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to join or donate if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next video.